The Prod Box brings experiences from myself, industry professionals, colleagues, senior leaders, and discussions on key topics within the product management and technology space from a player and coaching point of view, aiming to help us all learn and succeed in building great product management teams, resulting in great software products. So welcome and enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe or join our mailing list at theprodbox.co.uk. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 5 of the Prod Box, User Experience and Product Management. So today I am joined by David Adams, who is a senior user experience and UI designer. He has a wealth of experience in product design and front-end software development, particularly in the healthcare space, and has spent the past 17 years working on web projects and is also my current design team lead. So welcome, David. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, David, there have been many times we have had conversations on effective design strategies, design systems, user research, design trends, material designs, etc. And, an important part of product management and creating products that customers love is ensuring that users have a positive experience and fully engage with your products while interacting with them.
Yeah.
And key to this, of course, is user experience design. So a quote that I really like to refer to by Steve Jobs is, design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. So the first question that I wanted to start with is around UX and UI design. It's not one and the same. So firstly, let's start off with, what is the difference?
So there are lots of abbreviations for UX UI nowadays as it becomes a deeper specialist discipline. So you have CX, which is customer experience designer, and they deal with the overall experience a user has with a company, not just the products the company creates. Then you have an IA, which is an information architect, and there are a few others. But the broad definition of a UX designer is user experience, basically. And they deal more with the psychological and data analysis and, the analytic sides of design. User research, A and B testing, more to do with how a user interacts with the product and how they feel when they use it. A UI designer or an interface designer is more visual. They are more concerned with the way it looks and the interactions to try and make them as simple as possible for the user. UI designer is also involved in things like the use of color or the way that the page or the app is laid out, and using design systems, or in the old money they used to call them style guides. But a user interface designer will create research-based prototypes and different things like that. But how they work together, well, you'll find that both UI and UX, they work together to achieve the same goal, which is to make awesome products. But without the UX and the research, you'll be randomly throwing components into a user interface and hoping it would look and function well for the user. And in reverse, you can research and put together prototypes without the consistency that UI design brings, but you'll spoil the overall user experience with an inconsistent design.
It's really good that you pointed out the different roles. So you have an information architect, you have a customer experience designer, a user experience designer, a user interface designer. And, many organizations may have a role that encompasses many of those roles or actually just focuses on one role in particular. So it's really interesting that you have many different variants of designers, and it's really trying to understand actually which one fits your organization. So, as you mentioned, combining two roles ensures, great design. And how would you go about combining UX and UI design to ensure that you're delivering, a great user experience and a great product to your users?
Well, that's a good question. I think for me, great design is invisible. The user shouldn't have to think about what to do next when they're looking at a web page or a product or, whatever it is. It's about the psychology behind the UI. And there are some laws which we follow in order to get the best from a product and to get the best user experience. Things like Hicks law, for example, that basically is the time it takes for a decision to be made. And the time it increases the number and the complexity of choices. And you've got other things like the law of proximities, Van Restorff effect. There are multiple ones which we have to follow, or which we should follow, in order to create a good UI and a good user experience. But the UX determines how we lay out the UI based on the research, so that the UI we have is just not a bunch of ideas.
I think it's great that you say great design is invisible.
Yes. Yes.
It's a really good point that you make there, because you do want your user to use your product and not think about, oh, this is, not think about how to use it and just use it. So that's a
Yeah.
great point there. And I think it's very important when thinking about how you envisage your product to be used and how it fulfills its purpose. So if we're focusing on user experience, what do you feel you need to ensure that your user has a great experience using your
Well,
product?
okay, well, like I mentioned before, great design is invisible. And when I say that, it means that the interface, the actual product doesn't like slam into your face. It's something which is easy to use. It needs to have great usability. The user shouldn't have to think about the interface and produce their cognitive load. In other words, let's try not to make them think about what they're doing. It should be that easy. The other thing is that about the product or the website, is that they need to feel comfortable using it. I mean, after all, you want them to come back and use the product more,
Yeah, yeah.
especially if it's something they use every single day. You want them to feel comfortable using it. And so those are some of the things I think will make a great UI, great user experience. And that's what we're aiming for at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, we want people to buy our products.
And I thought, you've worked in the industry, you've been a user experience designer and a UI designer for 17 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
you've worked on many projects, many web projects, you've built many products over the years. What do you feel are the common challenges when it comes to user experience and UI design? And, how can we avoid these pitfalls based on your experience?
That is a really, really good question. I mean, some of the things that have happened over the years, it kind of like hones you into how to, correctly address these particular challenges. So, for example, you can't assume that you know more than the customer. The customer is the person that uses the product every single day. Or if you're just designing for a customer, you need to be able to have lots of user testing, lots of research. And what I find is that you really need to listen to what the customer wants. On the UI side of things, you need to have a consistent UI. Buttons must be in a specific place. The colors should be consistent. Um, if you have in your UI a send button, for example, the send button should be more or less in the same place, or very obvious as to where it is. You need a clear hierarchy as to how things are laid out and how they're set out. One of the other things which I find that we as UI designers tend to neglect, we shouldn't do this, but accessibility. There are lots of
Yeah.
disabled people that use products. Some are blind, some are colorblind, some can't hear, but we need to bear that in mind when we're designing our products, that there are other people that don't have all the senses that we have. Also, what the other thing I find is that I think products should have a personality. I find that the language we use in our products is very corporate. You understand what I mean? And we need to
Yeah.
be a bit more personable. So, for example, if an error comes up, normally the error will say, "Error, see your system admin." Whereas if we made it more friendly, like, "Oh, something's happened here, we can't fix it. Please contact your system admin." The language is better, and it brings a bit more of a personal message to the person and makes the product a bit more personable to the user. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that you mentioned is you tend to think that you know more than the customer.
Yeah.
And one thing that I say all the time is you are not the customer. It's really important, in user experience, in UI design, in product management, to listen to the customer, to
That's right.
understand
Yeah.
what problem you are trying to solve,
Mm.
because that problem is what you're going to base the design on, who your users are, who's the persona that you're building this thing for. And accessibility, absolutely. I think I did an episode on bias, episode 3, everyone, that addresses this. Some of the things that we forget and neglect, as you say, that we don't think about when we are thinking who is going to use our products. And everybody's different, and we want to prevent ourselves from having that inherent bias or that unconscious bias when
Yeah.
building these products, and try to think about every situation. Or you can't think about every user, you can't design for everyone,
No.
but
Yeah.
try to be as inclusive as possible. And absolutely friendly. Everybody likes a friendly face, a friendly voice, friendly language, and it makes the user more comfortable
That's
using your
correct.
product. So definitely key when thinking about design and product management in general. So
Mm.
going on to the link between user experience and product management, how do you work successfully with the product management function when it comes to user experience and UI design of products?
Yeah, I mean, with product management and a UI designer, I notice I haven't said the user interface designer, because I find that the UX design or the UX of a product and the product management, the roles kind of overlap. And so it's important that you define which role each is doing. We both gather knowledge on user behavior, and we have a vision of as to where the product should be going. And these are certain links for both roles. And although UX designers are more on the craft side of things, and PMs are more considered with the management side of things, both roles, if not clearly divided, it can be unfortunate that they will be in opposition to each other. And that's a situation which only hurts the product. The other thing that we need to do is to share knowledge. It's vitally important that if a PM gets information from a client about a product, that they share that with the user experience designer, so that they can help to enhance the product. Secondly, we need to respect each other's disciplines. There's lots of overlapping roles, and it's just about clearly defining which role the UI designer is doing or the product manager is doing. And that would help to create as I keep saying, an awesome product.
I absolutely agree. And I think what you said early on about the roles overlapping is definitely something that I've seen happen before, especially on the user experience side or the user research side. So a large part of product management role or being a product owner is really understanding your users, understanding which segments or your focus segments that you're building this product for. You're creating personas, you are trying to create your user and build the product from that. You're doing your user research, you do focus groups, user interviews, you do usability
Yeah.
testing as part of a product management role. But that could also fall under a user experience designer's role or a user researcher. And I think you
Yeah.
mentioned also about respecting each other's disciplines, which is definitely key, because you're great at what you do. Product management has their role, they understand how to find out what it is we're doing and where the value lies, and the user experience designer will then bring it to life, so to speak. So I think the two roles definitely have to work together, and it's
Yeah.
really key for both roles to understand the others so that they can work successfully together. And I think part of a product manager role or product owner role is really to have an understanding of user experience, really to have an understanding of, good UI design, because that helps the product manager or product owner in their role to
Yes.
build
Yeah.
great products and work alongside the design team. So, I really think it's key for them to work together. How do you feel it's key for product management or product owner to have a good understanding of UX and UI? Has it helped you in roles that you've had in the past, if they do? And have you had experiences where they haven't had so much experience or exposure to UX and UI, and how has that impacted products that you've worked on?
So for me, if I come across a product owner or a product manager who doesn't really have the, how can I put it, the knowledge, the design knowledge, I like to teach. So I will point them in the right direction as to, why do we put this button here? Why is it this color? Why do we not have so many things on the page? And these are all based upon the design laws or the UI laws, whatever you want to call them. Things like visual hierarchy, Hicks law, different things like that. But one thing I find really, really important is that when they do have that kind of knowledge, if you're, say, for example, you're presenting a mock-up or a wireframe or whatever, then they can look at your wireframes and, David, that what you've got there is not consistent with that previous mock-up that you've got. And so they can make those visual corrections, because sometimes you're staring at a screen and you're designing stuff, and sometimes you forget that, okay, that bit needs to go there. And
Yeah.
the product owner, if they have that kind of design mindset, they can point out things which are not quite right. Come on, even us designers sometimes mess up, and
Oh, do you?
we need, we need to acknowledge that. But a good product owner would help you, and a good UI designer, UX designer will help the product owner. So yes, yeah, those are some of the things which I find would help.
Absolutely. And I think it's key to remember, it's really important to remember that this is an iterative process. We work in an agile way. Design is not going to be 100% complete. It changes over time. It changes with feedback. It changes with our market research or the direction that our product is going
Yeah.
in. So it's really important to understand, if you don't get it right on the first iteration on your delivery of MMP, then it's okay. You're going to get feedback. It's really important to have metrics implemented where you can, when you're delivering software products, so you can understand how the product is being used and feed that back into the user experience process between the product manager and or product owner and user experience designer, where you can work on that and build it into the product to enhance it even more, make it an even better experience for your user. So when thinking about, you've got this brand new product, this idea that's, this vision that's come onto your plate, what are the essential steps or processes for you when kicking off the user experience design for a brand new product?
Well, there are quite a few different methods that people use. I mean, I can speak for myself, and I think the methods I use are quite, I would like to think they're quite common. But the first thing you need to do is you need to understand the problem that the user is facing. What is the product for? And once you have an understanding of that, then you can start to do things like build personas. You can start to create user journeys or user maps, so that you can create stories that are based upon those particular journeys. And one thing which I've got to stress, you've got to research, research, research. Talk to potential users. Look at your rivals, if you have any. Look at them, see what they're doing. What makes their product successful, or what makes their product not successful? But those are the kind of things that you should be looking at, researching. And once you've got that type of information, the next thing you should be doing is brainstorming and creating prototypes and wireframes. Now, some people do what's known as design sprints, where they take about a week and they all have different bodies that come in, like the product owner, obviously the user experience designer. It could be a stakeholder, maybe even some of the users who they're building the product for. But normally they will take about a week, and they'll just run through, they'll brainstorm, they'll prototype, they'll go through the user journeys bit by bit, just to make sure that the direction that they're going in is the correct one. And once you've gone through that process, not only will you have stories, I mean, you mentioned earlier that most of design is iterative. And yes, that's correct. And, as we go through this process, it will be an iterative process. But the one thing I should also mention, I mean, lastly, for this, we need to be empathetic with the problem that we have. In other words, put yourself into the user's shoes. What would you want from the product? What is it that will help you solve the problem that you have? What is it about that product that will solve the problem that you're having? Those are the processes you'll go through when you're starting a new UI project, in my opinion.
Definitely. And I think all the things you mentioned, and probably some listeners will recognize as product managers, that's exactly what some of the actions that we would be really heavily involved with. So you immediately see the
Yeah,
overlap there.
exactly.
So, user mapping, personas, doing feature analysis.
This is why I was saying that it's very important that the roles are defined, when you're starting off a project here.
Yeah, absolutely. Brainstorming, running the design sprints, understanding the problem that your user is having and the reasons why you are building this product. What problem are you solving? That's
Mm,
really key. It's really core to a product role, whether product manager or product owner. It's really key to understand the problem. It's really key to create those personas. So,
yeah,
you can immediately see that overlap, and definitely key to define the roles, definitely key to understand the remit of each of the roles, but then also work together in a collaborative environment. If you are a product manager and you don't have a
yes,
user experience design team,
yeah,
or maybe just have front end designers or front end developers, sorry, then it's really key to take on that user experience role in order to build great products, to have an outcome which is aligned to your vision. So,
yeah.
what are the useful tools and methods that you have used in the past to best help the UX and UI design process?
There are hundreds, not hundreds, so I'm exaggerating, but there are loads of different, products that you can use to create UI, UX design. But for me, my choice, the first tool of choice that I have is my Moleskine book, my handy 0.2 millimeter black pen, and my H6 pencil, because that's what I use to do quick sketches and ideas. You can't beat that for quickly jotting down any ideas and thoughts you may have. Now, for a UX designer, they will probably use things like usability testing. They'll take interviews, focus groups. I'm mentioning things which product managers do as well. A to B
Yeah,
testing.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, heat maps. Grabbing those analytics. I mean, it's so important that your product has analytics so that you can actually see how the user is using your product. Things like Google Analytics and a few. There are others, but Google Analytics is the first one that comes to mind. A to B testing, I've mentioned that already. Personas, personas are so important, but all of that comes about from doing the research into the product. And so, a good method of understanding and gaining knowledge as to how your user will use your product is to actually just create personas. But generally, you just get feedback from users as well. Sometimes a website or a product will have a little, what do you think of our product, and send us feedback. And I find that you'll get a lot of feedback from people saying, look, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And mostly though they actually go to say the product management, who then puts them into a sprint for, if you work in Agile or Scrum, they'll put them into a sprint and say, look, our customers got this problem, but they don't normally look at the overall picture as to why are they having that particular problem. What's happened where they've been taken to that particular point where something is now broken or it doesn't work properly. And those are I'm going off kilter, but those are the kind of things that, methods that people use in order to get feedback. I mean, basically, a user experience designer will just want to understand how the user is using the product. They want to know how they're feeling. They want to know the frustrations and all that kind of stuff, so that they can emphasize with the user. They want to make sure that the product that they're designing for is the best. And so that's the only way to do it, is just by communicating with the user. The other thing is you need to make sure that you and the product owner have the same vision and direction. Don't be afraid to call out something that looks bad. If it looks bad, call it out. But in doing that, you should also have a reason. Don't just say it's bad because that's what I think. Have a reason why you believe something doesn't look good or it doesn't work. And the other thing is negotiate with each other, talk to each other. Don't. It shouldn't be a battle. It should be about communicating, cooperating with each other, and trying to understand where the other person's coming from. I find those are good methods. Now, I mentioned before that sometimes you just stare at the screen and you may miss something, or something just, become blind to it. When those things happen, you just need to take a break from it all. Just walk away, go to the park, look at something green, but just do something else. Play guitar, whatever. But just walk away from what you are doing at that particular point, and then come back to it later with fresh eyes. I was going to mention being bored. In fact, I'll do that. Yeah, I said be bored. Now, I was looking at a 99U presentation by a guy called Kyle T. Webster. Now, Kyle T. Webster made $100,000 from being bored. Now, how did he be bored? Well, basically, he was in a Starbucks and he had a beetroot salad. And he wasn't playing with his phone. He was just like waiting, staring at this thing. And he noticed the pattern that the beetroot juice kind of made on his plate. He took a picture of it. And then when he got home, he thought, this looks really interesting. And so what he did is he created a Photoshop brush from it. He created a kind of package. And with that package, he sold over $100,000 worth of it. And this is just from him sitting in a Starbucks, just being bored, staring at beetroot juice. So sometimes your subconscious will allow you to do things or make you think of things that, or solutions to problems that you may have. And so it's important to sometimes just walk away from something and come back to it later. But that being said, some of the tools of a UI designer, a user interface designer, and what we use Adobe XD for creating prototypes and wireframes and all that kind of stuff. And we also use Azure as well. But there are others, like, for example, you've got Sketch if you are using a Mac, you've got Figma, you've got InVision, and as we said before, there are about 1 million and two others. Okay, I'm exaggerating again, but there's loads of them out there. There's loads of them. Yes.
Brilliant. And I think, some of the tools that you mentioned, I really like to use. And as a product manager myself, it's really about talking to the customer. And I always say I'm a fan of qualitative data. So really speaking to the customer, doing usability testing, doing focus groups, interviews. But, you don't shy away from the quantitative data because it just gives you a real picture of how your product is being used. But then, that qualitative data gives you deep insight into why they're using it, how they're using it. And you can use that to feed it back into the process. And, I'm not an artist, not a designer, but, using tools like Balsamiq to create wireframes, as you mentioned, you've worked with product owners in the past,
of course,
who have used wireframes to then talk through visions with the design team. And I think it's really important, you don't have to know how to use these products like XD or like InVision, etc. But you could just draw it, as you said, you use your pen and paper, you can just draw it.
You can just use pen and paper to get your vision across. I mean, as you mentioned Balsamiq, because one of the things I didn't put on here, or I didn't think about, because I don't really like using it, but it is a tool that is very easy to use for somebody who's not design savvy. So, it is a product which is there to be used. But yeah, pen and paper, if you sit, you're sitting around a table, just take out your pen and paper and just scribble your design. I mean, a user experience designer or user interface designer will understand, what your vision would be, or, well, if you explain it to them very well.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think even just getting into a room with stakeholders, the product team, design team, just getting whiteboard and drawing, and then bouncing ideas off of each other is a really good method to use to hash out designs, as well as obviously using software tools that are out there. Some of the user research tools that I really like to use one called Optimal Workshop, where you can build experiments, send to your users, and then review the results of those. So it is like quantitative data because you're building these experiments. You do A/B testing or tree testing if you're looking at information architecture, for
Yes.
example. So it's really, there's so many tools out there that it depends on what your goal is, what your aim is, to use. But, experiment, iterate, find out what works best for you. We'll find out what works best for the organization as well. And it's really important because then you'll create great products, and then you work collaboratively with people in the organization as well, which is also very important. And everybody then becomes on board or bought into the vision of the product, and get really excited about it as well as speaking to customers. They'll get really excited about it because they feel like, oh, right, this is great. And you're feeding, and they are feeding into that vision also. Fantastic. So I'm going to put you on a little bit of a spot. Give me an example of a software product that you feel has a really bad design.
Oh, good grief. Microsoft Front Page. It's an old product.
Right.
It's a really old product, but it was awful. Oh my goodness, it was awful. The interface was not great, but having said that, it was mostly for web design, I believe. I think I tried to use it once, and that was it. I was like, no way. So went ahead and used something else. But I think there are not that many bad products out there at the moment. They're actually very good. I mean, a lot of them, some of them are web based. Like, for example, Figma. It's not only is Figma available for Mac and PC, but it's also available on the web. So you can kind of do your whatever you want to do on the web as well, which is really great. But then you have specific ones like Sketch, which is purely for Mac, but that's a really good product too. So of recent, there is a kind of standard which they're using, and most of them are some of them are web based. In other words, you can use them in a browser, but others you can easily download onto your computer and use them. Like I said, XD is pretty good, and with some of the updates that they've got, it's making it a really good contender for actually using it full time for UX UI design. Just really great features that are in XD at the moment.
Great, fantastic. And I think Microsoft Front Page might not be around anymore. I might be wrong, but
well, that's just showing my 17 years of age. I mean,
I think it might have been discontinued, but don't quote me on that, guys.
And no wonder.
Well, I guess you were right. Well, they just did say that design was not very good. I think one experience that I remember is the Wikipedia, when they moved the search bar from the top right to left, and there was absolute uproar because people were just like, what have you done? This is ridiculous. Where's the search? I can't find the search. And that brings us back to the example of design is invisible. So you don't even notice it until it's gone. And you don't even notice the ease of use of it until it's gone. And it's something that you've learned. So it's really hard to unlearn something once you've learned it. So, that was a real mistake on Wikipedia's part. And then obviously they had to put the search bar back.
Well, they broke one of the laws of UI, which is called Jacob's law. And basically, it's that the law is basically saying that a user spends a lot of time on other sites, and so it means that they would prefer your site, to work more or less the same as the other sites that they've been looking at. So you'd normally find the search bar on the top right hand corner of a web page, or in that general area. So when they moved it, it's like, well, what's going on? Where's it gone? It's not there, and so because people are used to seeing things in a specific place, and when it's not there, that's when all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, definitely. And it's if you guys really want a good read, if you just Google Wikipedia search bar moved, then some of the comments are very, very funny. So that might give you a bit of a laugh. Well, thank you, David. It's been a great session. Have you got any final thoughts and takeaways for our listeners?
Well, look, we mentioned this before, but product managers and UI, UX roles, they overlap. But it's how you handle these overlaps that will contribute to a smooth and successful product process. I think research, we keep banging on about research, but it's so important. Whether it's the product management or the user experience person, make sure whatever research you have, make sure it's shared between you guys. You are both on board with prototypes as well, with wireframes, etc., etc. If there's something you don't like, then be constructive with the criticism. And this is the same for a UX designer as well. Lastly, I think it's important to have in place a design process, and this will help with getting from your initial idea to a finished product.
And how, if any listeners would like to get into contact with you, how can they do that?
So if you want to contact me or see what I'm up to, you can always contact me on LinkedIn. Just do a search for David Adams, big hand, and hopefully my name will pop up.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you again, David, for joining me today on the Podbox.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's been quite enjoyable.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and please share with others who may find it interesting or useful. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our mailing list at thepodbox.co.uk and join the conversation on Instagram or Twitter at thepodbox. See you on the other side.